Hello everyone, I hope you're having a good day. Today we're going to be going over the tips and tricks I've amassed over the past year shipbuilding for you all, as well as some of the other powerful tools that I see not used as often as they probably could be. So I suppose let's hop right into the general stuff. So to start off our general section, we're going to do something that seems pretty simple, but it's actually pretty important, and that's movement. So right now we are in currently one of the two view modes. So this is where you have a mouse and you hold right click to look around. But if you press tab, just like in the universe, you can go into a first person, it's more of a first person edit mode. And so this way you control your mouse like that and you actually click where you're looking instead of wherever you're at. And it has its uses, and some people prefer either way, but just to know that you can switch between both of them. And then there's also, holding right click down and space. That way you can pan around just like this, and that'll help a lot when you're lined up pretty well to either a surface or something you're editing, and you need to move around just a little bit. And it really helps when you're doing little tiny edits on something you're really close to. And I've been trying to use this more. I don't use it as much as I should be, but it definitely helps. The next thing that should really just generally apply is making a plan. So even if it's something as simple as saying, oh, I know my cockpit's going to go here, or I want my ship to generally look like this, it's really important. And especially for those ships that are going to be using all of these curved beams. So, for instance, the ship we have here, the Morgan, this one has all of these 30-degree beams all around. And without proper planning, you're going to end up with all kinds of misalignments, which has happened in the past. And so just keeping an idea of what you're working with and then knowing that you're going to use the proper parts, that will help you a ton when you're trying to figure out what you want to do for your ship. And it'll cause a lot less pain down the line if there's something you have to edit, even after you've put almost everything on your ship. So that's just something to keep an eye out for. It's not necessarily required, but as with most things in this video, it's going to be very strongly encouraged. And then the next thing that I really don't see used often is modules. So these are, I'd say, one of my favorite tools that isn't in the toolbox. So a module, you just select something and you can press the plus there and make it into a module, and you can select it, move it around, all this stuff. You can even save it for later. So you could even save your entire ship as a module and just import it elsewhere, which I've seen happen and people will do to test ships. So just be aware of that. But even less used are these two buttons right here. Now there's the detach, so basically it just makes the module not a module anymore, but even less so the attach button. So how that works is you have a module and you have a piece you want to add to it. So you got to click the attach, and then you see that weird M plus. So that M plus means you're doing it right, but then you want to take your cursor and click on the actual module, and then boom, it's attached. And so it's just those four buttons, super simple, straightforward, but incredibly powerful, especially if you're going to be doing anything on a ship that's very repetitive, because as you can kind of see, like the thrusters on here, those are all modules so that I can copy them really easy, and it saves just a lot of time. And then finally, this is something that I've slowly started doing, and it's really made a difference. But so when you're in the middle of making an edit, or you're not sure something on your ship is going to work, don't throw away everything that you had previously. So if you guys remember earlier on this ship, this beam right here stretched from here to there. And I'm not sure if I want to take it out yet. It's slightly misaligned, so it doesn't work properly. And so I'm trying to find a replacement. but I'm not sure if putting a beam in like this is going to be the proper replacement. So what I've done is I've just pulled it off the ship and I'm leaving it out here until I either come up with a solution or I just want to go back. Because if this isn't the right one and you end up deleting the part you had before, you might have to go back digging in a save file, and no one wants to go digging through a save file. So that's just one reason that you might not want to delete anything that you've had before. Well, not anything. So that's one reason that you might not want to delete what you were editing before, just in case you mess up something or you don't like the look of it, and you'll never have to go back too far to actually fix it. So now on to bolting and welding. So it's not really the most exciting stuff there is, but it's still very important, and I used to and still do trip up on this. So the first thing that should be like flashing in red in your mind is weld and then bolt. So when I say bolt right now, I am referring to the auto bolt tool. So when applied to selection is off, remember it bolts everything, including beams. So what you want to do is before you bolt, if you've even touched a beam, you want to weld and apply to all because that'll just do everything. And you want to make sure you do that because if you don't and then you bolt without welding, you'll get something like that. A perfectly weldable joint, but instead it's bolted. And that uses attachment plates, it puts up your bolt count. It's just not good in general. So you really just want to keep an eye out for that. If you even move a beam around at all, you want to weld then bolt, or else you'll get stuck with something like that. And it's just a hassle to go through your ship and try and fix it all. But so then on that topic, in both of these tools is apply to selection. So both of them have it, and it is exactly what it says. It applies to selection. So if I want to only bolt there, boom. And it's very helpful for two reasons. The first being, if you want to bolt or weld a larger ship, your welding and bolting times are going to skyrocket if you keep using bolt all and weld all. So using that select feature, it'll only keep it limited to what you're actually working on, and that will cause your times to go down, and that'll be super nice to use. But also, the other part is, say you have two overlapping plates. I've had this issue when I've been making sliding doors. If you have two overlapping plates, the auto bolt will bolt them to each other. And you can't really say, hey, don't auto bolt this. So that's another time when using the apply to selection is really good, because that way you don't get stuck with something you don't want, such as, in the back of your ship, a single bolt being attached here that causes severe structural instability that you don't want. So that's just why why using selection is a really good idea. Now sometimes it's unavoidable, but if you can, it's probably worth it. And so this next part choice, is extremely important, and it's going to be changing a lot, especially in the early days of Starbase. So part choice is all just going to focus on the asset browser. So the first off is really just to check the parts that you can use to build. There are a lot of really interesting things that you may not realize are there that can be exactly what you need if there's a problem you're having, and it might be the exact solution because the developers thought to add it. And plus, it's just some really cool stuff. Like these little warning light buttons, they glow. And you can assemble them into 2x2s, and they fit perfectly together. There's just a ton of little things in here that you may not have noticed that are super useful. And for instance, it's going to be these. So in networking, this is one part that just recently got added that I am a huge proponent of. And those are the ducts. So these guys seem fairly simple, But in reality, they transfer both cable and pipe. So not only does that save your very low pipe limit, it also saves your cable limit. And that's just super helpful down the line when, for instance, you're making a massive ship like this. And the best part about this design is it fits right in the groove of any beam. So you can run them all over your ship and they'll take up no extra space. And as long as you connect them to the next one, they'll transfer in between. So it's the tools like that you want to keep an eye out for. Just the first time you boot up, take a look through the asset browser, find where things are, just because you'll be looking around for certain things for the rest of your time in building. Like me, I just finally figured out where the battery is, finally. And then just paying attention to the update notes. So that way you know if something's going to be coming down the line that could really help you out. Part alignment. So, you guys, if you watch me on stream or my VODs on YouTube, you will see this all the time. And these are things that I will constantly use, and it will lead into my favorite tool. But first, I'm going to teach you some tools that even I don't really use, but are super helpful. And I found that out really earlier when I was copying this fin to the other three sides. So that is over here in the asset browser, the lock and hide tools. So the hide, it does exactly what it sounds like, right? It hides it from view. Now there is still a little outline, but it's still helpful, so you can really see what's behind everything. But the issue is you can still click on the hidden bits. So what you can do is you can lock. When you lock, that means you cannot click on that category. So even if it's not hidden, you still can't click on it. So that's just super useful, especially if you're copying and pasting, so that way you only get what you're looking for. And it's just great for modifying parts of your ship or just trying to get in to a certain little part that's maybe obscured by pretty much everything in your way. But so then, now it's time for my favorite tool, and that is the snapping tool. So every piece in Starbase has snapping joints, and some of them are weird, some of them make sense. So one thing you want to familiarize yourself with is the snapping points you're going to be using most often. Plates are fairly self-explanatory. They've got snapping points in the corners. They're super easy to do. But one thing I find is that beams, they're slightly different from what what you think the attachments would be. So one thing you can do to be prepared is just keep an idea of what snapping points you're going to be working with. And that way, say if you're copy and pasting, the entire ridge, keep an idea of somewhere where there's a snapping point that lines up just perfectly. And that way, your snapping endeavors will be just so much easier because you're already going to have everything planned out. And even if it's just one point, that leads to another, because no one is saying you can't like cut this up and just put one piece down and then snap everything to it. So that's incredibly useful. And the snapping tool is just nice, especially when, say, a plate won't line up with another. I've had that a lot of times when you're working with really weird shapes, and so having that tool just be able to snap immediately is great. And that kind of leads into the other thing that I was going to do. So, snapping might not always work. Or, as I said, there's some weird snap points on these things. You may not necessarily have a point you can actually snap to, but yet a plate won't align. So, one thing you can do, so say this plate can't line up properly with this plate below it, right? Now, obviously it can, but there are some instances where it just won't. So one thing you can do, all right, is you take a plate, and usually I go for the 12 by whatever centimeters, usually the 24. But if you can just line it up properly, that gives you a point of reference. And then that way, the plate that you're trying to line up will just snap into place most of the time. For me, it's a stopgap measure. It's the last thing I'm going to try, but it is incredibly useful if you ever get stuck. It will save your life. It saved mine so many times. And then finally, the last thing about part alignment is, well, part alignment. You gotta make sure everything is in the right orientation. So make sure your thrusters are facing where you want them to be, or the most important of them all, make sure your FCU's pointed forwards. That's what those little triangles are, and make sure this side is up, because that determines the orientation of your entire ship, and it will mess up things. It always has in a couple of builds I've done. And so that's one thing you just want to keep an eye out for. And, make sure, like, your powerful thrusters, if you're trying to use them for actual thrust, make sure they're just pointed out the back of your ship. And I'm pretty sure a couple of you guys knew this was coming, but YOLOL. So the most important thing that I've found is that there are 3 different kinds of chips. So we've got basic, advanced, professional, and they're all here. But just keep in mind, the price of these is very different, and they can do so many different things. The basic is it's really basic arithmetic, logical, but as you go up, you get powers, square roots, modulos, and into trigonometric functions. And so you want to keep in mind of which you're going to be using, because you don't want to go expensive if you don't have to. And that's one thing I've started to notice that I've accidentally been doing, but we're getting better. And that ties directly into checking the STARBASE Discord if there's some idea you need or YOLOL that you want, because there is a lot of YOLOL that has been put into there that you can check and you can probably copy and use in your own ships. And then there's me using some of Fandler's code just to make my torpedoes work. So you want to just keep an eye out, because if you have an issue, it may have already been solved there. And another thing is, there are a lot of parts in here that pertain to YOLOL that may not necessarily be in the YOLOL little folder. So a great instance of this is the networking tools. Now, I had someone just the other day, I'm not going to point you out, but you know who you are, who was trying to create a secondary network within their ship. And boom, it's right here. It's a network relay. You can do it super easily just using these. But they didn't know that that existed. So it's worth just taking a look and seeing all of the very powerful tools that you have at your disposal, and that way it could save you hours and a couple of your brain cells while you're at it. And so finally, my last tip is to just really check the community. So if you've got a problem, there is a really good chance that somebody else has also had that problem. So you could give YouTube a try, you could check the wiki, there's a ton of part lists there, and you could also go in the Discord and just ask someone, and someone will be able to answer your question. And if nobody can, you can also drop a comment in this video and I'll try and help you out. Honestly, just drop a comment on any of my videos and I'll do what I can. But the community is really helpful and they'll do what they can to help you out. And so that's kind of what I wanted to tie in at the end of this video, is if there's something in here that you didn't notice but you thought it helped you, feel free to put it in the comments, and to help other people who are going to be going into shipbuilding or who are just interested in trying it out. So in that case, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Happy shipbuilding!